You wake to a sound you feel in your teeth, a low and distant roar seeping through the cold stone of your cell like a tide coming in. And you know it is the voice of 50,000 Romans gathering in the sun for the first games. The air in the cell is thick with the smell of old sweat and damp straw, and you lie still for a moment, listening to Casca in the next bunk, the endless, rhythmic scrape of his whetstone on iron, the only other sound in the dark. You swing your legs off the thin straw pallet, and your bare feet meet the cold, gritty stone, and you begin the silent morning ritual of checking the leather straps on your greaves and the fit of your helmet's bronze grill, your fingers moving by memory in the gloom. Casca continues his sharpening, a sound like a slow heartbeat, and you can feel the vibration of the gathering crowd through the floor, a promise of violence that makes the porridge they bring taste like ash. The iron door groans open, and Lucius fills the frame, his silhouette a slab of muscle and scar tissue, and he moves down the cell block with the slow, assessing gaze of a man counting tools. He stops before you, his eyes missing nothing, the tightness of your wrap, the dull sheen on your helmet's brow, and he grunts, a sound that could mean approval or condemnation, before moving on to Casca, whose only answer is the steady hiss of stone on steel. Fontuche. Aye, the porridge arrives then, lukewarm and thick, and you eat it because you must. You follow the line of men out into the training yard, where the morning sun is a hammer on the hard-packed earth, and you take your place before the heavy wooden post, its surface a galaxy of old dents and fresh, pale splinters. Akimtho. You raise your practice sword, the weight familiar and dead in your hand, and you begin the drill, each impact sending a jolt up your arms that rattles your teeth, and you do not stop until the sweat runs in rivers down your back and your breath is a raw burn in your throat. The call comes just as your arms begin to tremble with fatigue, a sharp whistle from the gatehouse that cuts through the yard's grunts and impacts, and you lower your sword as the line of men turns as one toward the dark mouth of the tunnel that leads under the city streets. You fall into step behind Casca, the cool shadow of the archway swallowing you, and the roar of the crowd becomes a deep, subterranean thrum in the stone around you, growing louder with every step toward the sliver of blinding white light at the far end. You walk the tunnel's length, the roar ahead solidifying into a wall of sound that presses on your ears and chest, and the light at the end resolves into the stark geometry of the arena gate, a rectangle of searing white sand and blue sky. The air grows thick with the smell of hot dust, spilled wine, and animal dung, and you feel the men around you tense, their breathing becoming shallow as you approach the final turn where the Lannista's men wait to hand you your real sword and shield. A guard with a face like a clenched fist shoves the worn hilt of a gladius into your hand. Its leather grip slick with the sweat of the man who held it last, and another drops a heavy, curved scutum shield against your leg with a dull thud. You take a final breath of the tunnel's damp, cool air, tasting stone and rust, and then you step from shadow into the full, crushing weight of the sun, the sound of the crowd hitting you like a physical blow as you blink against the blinding white of the sand. Your eyes adjust to the glare, and the arena resolves into a vast, sun-scorched bowl of sand that stretches to the towering banks of marble and wood, where the crowd is a single, roaring beast. The heat is a physical weight on your shoulders, and the air shimmers with dust kicked up by the morning's beast fights, carrying the iron scent of old blood beneath the perfume of the nobles in the shaded boxes. Tamaha. You stand with the others in your cohort, a line of sweating men in the killing light, and you feel the gaze of the editor sweep over you from his high perch, as indifferent as the sun. The editor's hand lifts, a lazy gesture from the imperial box, and a gate on the far side of the arena groans open to disgorge your opponent, a secutor named Brutus, who moves with the heavy, rolling gait of a bull. He is a mountain of scarred muscle encased in bronze and leather, his helmet a smooth, featureless dome with two narrow eye slits, and he raises his sword to the crowd, who erupts in a familiar, adoring roar that tells you he is a favorite they expect to win. The editor's hand drops, and the world contracts to the 30 paces of sand between you and Brutus, who begins his advance with a slow, ground-eating stride that kicks up little puffs of dust with each step. You settle into your stance, your shield a welcome weight on your left arm, and you begin to circle, your eyes locked on the smooth, impassive metal of his helmet as you search for the rhythm of his breath and the telltale shift of his shoulders that will signal his first attack. He moves faster than a man his size should, a sudden explosion of muscle that brings his heavy blade down in a whistling arc, aimed to split your shield, and you meet it with the boss of your scutum, the impact shuddering up your arm and into your teeth. You give ground, letting his momentum carry him past, and you lunge with your gladius, but the point skitters off the bronze plates on his shoulder, and he pivots with a grunt, his shield edge slamming into your ribs and driving the air from your lungs in a hot gasp. You stumble back, the world a blur of white sand and screaming faces, and you feel a hot, wet line open up on your thigh, where his blade found its mark just below your guard. The pain is a bright, clean signal that cuts through the roar of the crowd, which rises to a fever pitch at the sight of your blood, darkening the sand, and you know you are being herded now, your defensive circle shrinking toward the Spina's unforgiving marble base, at the arena's heart. Your back meets the rough, sun-warmed marble of the Spina, and there is nowhere left to retreat. The crowds chant for your death, a single, pulsing word that fills the sky. Brutus advances for the final blow, his sword held high, and in that last second, your gaze drops from the blade to the sand at your feet, where a trickle of your own blood has pooled against the rusted iron bars of a drainage grate, one corner bent and loose from some forgotten impact. You drop to your knees as if in final submission, your left hand plunging into the hot sand and closing around a gritty handful, and as Brutus's sword reaches its apex, you surge upward, flinging the fine, blinding dust straight into the narrow slits of his helmet. He reels back with a choked roar, one hand clawing at his sealed visor, and you don't go for his sword, but instead throw your shoulder against the loose, rusted grate at the base of the spina, feeling the old iron shriek and give way. You dive headfirst into the sudden, cool darkness beneath the grate, the roar of the crowd cutting off as you land in shallow, stinking water that soaks your wounded leg. The channel is a tight, brick-lined tomb, and you scramble forward on hands and knees, The only light a faint gray rectangle from the hole behind you, which is suddenly eclipsed by Brutus's furious silhouette as he stabs his sword pointlessly into the void where you vanished. You scramble forward through the ankle-deep runoff, the brick walls scraping your shoulders in the tight dark, and you follow the faint promise of light that seeps from a grate somewhere ahead, the air thick with the smell of decay and damp stone. Behind you, Brutus's enraged bellows fade into the general roar of the confused crowd, and you push on, your wounded leg burning with each frantic movement, until the channel widens and you spill out into a dim, cavernous holding pen beneath the stands. You collapse onto the damp straw of the holding pen floor, your chest heaving as you suck in air that tastes of animal musk and old terror and the dozen other gladiators chained to posts or sharpening weapons stop their movements to stare at the bleeding man who crawled out of the wall. Their faces are a gallery of hard-eyed disbelief, because no one escapes the sand, and you can hear the crowd above still roaring in confusion, a sound like distant thunder trapped beneath the vaulted stone ceiling. The silence in the pen is heavier than the crowd's roar, broken only by the drip of water and the ragged sound of your own breathing. And you look up from the straw to see Lucius standing over you, his ruined face a mask of stone, as his eyes take in your bleeding leg and the filth from the drain. Pesci. He says nothing for a long moment, his gaze moving from you to the wall you came from and back, and then he reaches into a pouch at his belt and tosses a ragged cloth at your feet. You take the cloth and press it hard against the gash on your thigh, the rough linen biting into the wound as you meet Lucius's stare, and you see in his flat, appraising eyes not anger, but a cold calculation, as if you are a piece on a Latrunculi board that has moved to an unexpected square. He turns his head and spits into the straw, a gesture of profound contempt, but it is not directed at you, and he says nothing as the confused chants of the crowd above begin to shift into a new, ugly rhythm. The new chant from above resolves into a single, hammering demand for the vanished mouse to be found and dragged back to the sand, and you watch Lucius's jaw tighten as he listens to the voice of the mob that now dictates his next move. You are. He looks at you, then at the dark mouth of the drainage channel, and he makes a sharp, cutting gesture with his hand toward the deeper shadows at the rear of the pen, where the beast cages are kept. His meaning clear: disappear again, and do it now. You push yourself up, the pain in your leg a white-hot spike, and you limp toward the shadows where the beast cages reek of wet fur and panic, the chains of the other men rattling as you pass. Lucius turns his back to you, a silent shield against the guards now spilling into the far end of the pen, and you slip behind a stack of empty feed sacks, just as a voice barks an order to find the man who cheated the sand. You crouch behind the sacks, the rough burlap scratching your back, and you watch through a gap as the guards fan out with torches that paint the vaulted ceiling in jumping shadows. Their voices are sharp with confusion and anger, and you press the cloth harder against your leg to stifle the fresh seep of blood, your breath held tight in your chest as one of them passes so close you can smell the garlic on his breath and the oil on his leather. The guard moves past your hiding place, his torchlight sweeping over the sacks and missing you by inches, and you remain frozen until his footsteps fade, into the general clamor of the search. The pen is a chaos of shouted questions and rattling chains, and you use the noise to inch deeper into the reeking gloom behind the cages, where the stone is slick with condensation, and the only light comes from a single high grate, showing a sliver of the searing blue sky outside this tomb. You press your back against the cold, wet stone behind the last cage, the reek of the beasts, a thick blanket in the air, and you watch the torchlight and confusion from the main pen as the guards argue over where you could have gone. The single high grate shows that impossible square of free sky, and you know you cannot reach it, so you turn your gaze to the deeper darkness, where the drainage channel continues into the mountain of foundations. A path that leads away from the light and into the city's bowels. You leave the cage's shadow and slip into the drainage channel's deeper dark, the brick walls closing around you as you move away from the fading torchlight and the angry voices, and you follow the shallow, foul current that flows with a soft, whispering sound into the city's unseen foundations. The air grows colder, and the smell shifts from animal musk to the deep, mineral damp of ancient earth, and you move by touch alone, one hand on the slimy wall and the other clutching the bloody rag at your thigh, each step taking you further from the sand's verdict. The channel bends and the last of the light from the holding pen vanishes, leaving you in a darkness so complete you feel it on your skin, and you shuffle forward with your good leg leading, your fingers trailing along the slick, cold brick as the whispering water guides you deeper. The sounds of the search are gone, replaced by the drip of distant water and the low groan of the city's weight settling on its stones, and you have no idea where this path leads, only that it leads away. You walk for what feels like hours in the absolute dark, the only sounds the scuff of your feet in the muck and the frantic drum of your own heart, and the channel begins to slope upward until your outstretched hands meet not brick but rough-hewn wood, a heavy, rotten door set into the tunnel wall. You push against it with your shoulder, the wood groaning and splintering, and it gives way to a dim cellar filled with the earthy smell of roots and old wine, a forgotten storeroom beneath some city street far from the arena. You stand in the cellar's cool silence, the roar of the arena now a ghost in your ears, and you pull the rotten door closed behind you, sealing yourself into a darkness that smells of damp earth and forgotten vintages. You know you are not free, that the editor's memory is long and the city's walls are high. But for this one stolen moment, you are a man who chose the dark over the sand, and you breathe air that does not taste of blood or dust.